My name is Natalie Mercer. I am 34 years old. Until last Christmas, I believed that being dependable was the same as being loved. 2 days before I was supposed to fly home, my younger sister sent a message to our family group chat saying our parents couldn't afford Christmas that year. No dinner, no gifts, no gathering. She made it sound final, and my parents did nothing to correct her. I canceled my flight, accepted the lost fee, and told them I understood. On Christmas night, I sat alone in my Denver apartment eating reheated casserole while holiday music played softly from my laptop. Then, an Instagram notification appeared on my screen. My sister was live. I almost ignored it, but something made me tap. The video opened inside my parents' living room. Champagne glasses were raised beneath professional lighting. Relatives, family friends, and people who had told me they were staying home were laughing around a beautifully decorated Christmas tree. My sister turned the camera toward the crowd and called them the real Christmas crew. Nobody asked where I was. Nobody looked uncomfortable. The next morning, my father finally contacted me, but not to explain or apologize. He wanted $2,000 for January's rent, and he expected it by the following day. I read the message twice, opened my banking app, and canceled every payment connected to them. Then I wrote, "Stay out of my life. All of you." I blocked their numbers and went back to sleep. At 7:30 the next morning, my intercom started buzzing. My father, my mother, and my sister had driven through the night and were standing outside my building crying and demanding that I let them in. Before I tell you why they were so desperate to get inside, tell me where you're watching from and what the weather is like there. I'd love to see how far this story travels. I didn't open the door. I stood several feet away while the intercom kept buzzing, listening as the 3 people who had ignored me on Christmas suddenly acted as though reaching me was an emergency. To understand why they drove more than 7 hours through the night, you need to understand the role I had played in my family for years. My younger sister was Chloe. She was 27 and called herself a lifestyle creator, although most of her income came from occasional sponsored posts, boutique promotions, and small event collaborations. Online, she appeared to live a polished life filled with trendy restaurants, designer handbags, vacations, and perfectly decorated seasonal rooms. In reality, she spent most of what she earned maintaining the illusion that she was far more successful than she actually was. Our father, Robert, sold recreational vehicles on commission. Some months were good, but he treated every strong month as proof that the next one would be even better. Our mother, Diane, worked part-time in the office of a local elementary school. She avoided conflict so completely that she usually let the loudest person make every decision, then called it keeping the peace. They rented a split-level house in Papillion, just outside Omaha. After selling their old home to pay off debts, they promised the rental would only be temporary. 3 years later, they were still living there, and I was quietly covering part of the cost. It hadn't started as a permanent arrangement. One winter, Dad was short on rent because 2 sales had fallen through, so I sent him $800. A few months later, Mom couldn't cover an insurance deductible. Then their car needed repairs. Then the phone bill went up. Every request sounded temporary and came with the promise that things would get better next month. Eventually, helping became routine. I paid $420 every month toward Chloe's car because she insisted she needed an impressive vehicle to meet with brands. I kept the family phone plan in my name because it was cheaper. I also gave Mom a low-limit credit card for groceries and emergencies. The rule was simple. It could only be used for food, medicine, or a genuine household emergency. I never expected praise. I believed that because I had more stability, helping was simply what a good daughter and sister was supposed to do. My work made it possible. As an independent cybersecurity compliance consultant, I reviewed financial systems for banks, healthcare companies, and insurance providers. My income was strong, but I worked long hours, kept meticulous records, and spent my career making sure people couldn't misuse access to sensitive accounts. Somehow, I never applied that same caution to my own family. Christmas was the one time each year I convinced myself the arrangement was worth it. Our gatherings were loud and ordinary in the best possible way. Football played in the background while someone checked on the turkey. Cheap gifts arrived in Amazon boxes. People wore ugly Christmas sweaters and argued over mashed potatoes. For a few hours, I wasn't responsible for solving everyone's financial problems. I was simply a daughter coming home. That year, I booked my flight from Denver to Omaha weeks in advance. I bought Dad a heated jacket, ordered Mom a new stand mixer, and found Chloe the portable lighting kit she had mentioned wanting. I also scheduled a $2,000 transfer for December 27th to help cover January's rent. Around the same time, Chloe began hinting about her biggest holiday collaboration yet. Whenever I asked what she was planning, she changed the subject. During Thanksgiving, I suggested she stop financing expensive content before she actually received her sponsor payments. She rolled her eyes and said I didn't understand personal branding. I told her branding wasn't worth going into debt. After that, she barely spoke to me. Still, when her voice message appeared 2 days before Christmas, I didn't connect it to our disagreement. Chloe said, "Mom and Dad can't afford to host anyone this year, so Christmas is canceled." Mom replied with a heart emoji. Dad said nothing. I believed them because I had trained myself to believe that whenever my family struggled, my job was to understand. I replied that I was sorry things were so difficult and asked whether I should still fly in for a quiet visit. Chloe answered immediately. She said, "Mom and Dad are exhausted and just need the house to themselves." I offered to bring dinner or stay at a hotel. She said that would only make them feel guilty. Mom sent me a private message saying it had simply been a hard year and that we'd celebrate another time. Her words sounded warm, but they never answered the one question that mattered: whether they actually wanted to see me. Dad never replied. I canceled my flight and lost part of the fare. I told myself that complaining would be selfish if my parents were truly worried about paying rent. On Christmas Eve, I wished several relatives a Merry Christmas. Most sent back generic replies. My cousin Evan said he was busy with family and would call later. I assumed he meant his wife's family. Looking back, several of the responses were strangely careful, but I wasn't looking for a lie yet. On Christmas Day, I slept in, answered emails, and video called 2 friends who were visiting relatives in other states. One invited me to join her family's Christmas dinner over Zoom. I declined because I didn't want to explain why my own family had canceled on me. By evening, the silence felt even heavier. I heated up leftover casserole, poured sparkling water into a wine glass, and turned on a holiday movie. At 8:42, my phone notified me that Chloe had started a live stream. I almost dismissed it. Then I remembered that she had claimed our parents needed a quiet Christmas, and curiosity got the better of me. The video opened with music, laughter, and white and gold decorations. For one confused second, I thought she was at a hotel. Then the camera shifted, and I recognized my parents' stone fireplace. The house was packed. A large Christmas tree stood beside the staircase. Professional lighting illuminated a photo backdrop. Champagne bottles sat in silver tubs near the kitchen. At least 25 people moved through the rooms wearing coordinated holiday sweaters. I saw aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, and family friends. I saw people who had told me they were spending Christmas quietly at home. I saw Evan carrying a plate. Most painfully, I saw my parents smiling beneath the staircase while Chloe filmed them. They didn't look financially devastated. They looked thrilled. Chloe raised her glass and announced, "The real Christmas crew is here." People cheered. Someone asked where I was. Chloe laughed and said, "She doesn't really enjoy fun events like this." Dad looked toward the camera but didn't correct her. Mom lowered her eyes for just a moment, then smiled again. When Chloe moved closer to them, that tiny moment hurt more than the laughter. It proved she knew. The party hadn't been thrown together at the last minute. A printed sign displayed the name of a local event company. Branded bottles from a regional beverage company were arranged where the camera could easily see them. Chloe thanked a boutique for providing everyone's outfits and mentioned that a holiday video would be posted the following day. This had been planned for weeks. They hadn't canceled Christmas because they couldn't afford it. They had canceled my invitation. I kept watching. Chloe showed the dining table, catered appetizers, and the gifts beneath the tree. She called it a family holiday experience, eliminating any possibility that it was just a business event. I didn't comment. I didn't call. Instead, I recorded the live stream. My work had trained me to document everything before reacting. As Chloe walked through the house, I noticed the event company's name again. It looked familiar. I opened my banking app and checked the card I had given Mom. A pending charge for $1,784 appeared from that same event company. Another charge for more than $600 had come from a beverage distributor. The card that was supposed to be used only for groceries and emergencies had helped pay for the Christmas party they claimed they couldn't afford. Something colder than anger settled inside me. I saved the statements and the recording of the live stream in a single folder. I wanted to believe the card had been used by accident or that Chloe planned to reimburse me. Then, at 9 o'clock the next morning, Dad sent a message. No greeting. No question about my Christmas. No acknowledgement of the party. He wrote, "Need the $2,000 for January rent by tomorrow. Don't make us chase you for it." They had used my money to exclude me, lied to me, celebrated without me in public, and still expected me to pay their rent. I opened the scheduled transfer and pressed cancel. Canceling the rent transfer took only a few seconds. Ending everything else took most of the evening. First, I replied to Dad. I wrote, "You canceled me, not Christmas. Stay out of my life, all of you." Then I blocked him. I blocked Mom. I blocked Chloe. I didn't threaten them. I didn't post the live stream. I simply removed my money and my access from lives in which I had become nothing more than a payment method. I locked the emergency card before another charge could go through. I removed my bank account from Chloe's automatic car payment. I arranged for the family phone plan to separate in 30 days, giving everyone enough time to open their own accounts. The internet service at my parents' rental house was still in my name, so I notified the provider that I would no longer be responsible for the account after 10 days. I did the same with 2 other household services. I didn't have anything shut off immediately. I gave proper notice, and more than enough time for them to take responsibility. Finally, I changed every password, security question, and recovery code connected to any account they might know about. Around 10:30 that night, the consequences finally reached them. The event company attempted to process the remaining balance for the party, and the emergency card was declined. Chloe discovered that the payment method for her next car installment had been removed. Dad realized the rent transfer was gone. They called from blocked numbers, private numbers, and even Chloe's business account. I ignored every one of them. Then the email started. Mom insisted there had been a misunderstanding. Chloe claimed the party had been sponsored and had cost almost nothing, even though my bank statement proved otherwise. Dad sent exactly one sentence. "Call me now before you make this worse." I turned off my notifications and went to sleep. I expected them to be angry the next morning. I never expected them to drive all the way to Denver. At 7:30 a.m., my intercom started buzzing so aggressively that I thought there had been some kind of emergency. Dad stood closest to the entrance. Mom was behind him with both hands covering her face. Chloe was wearing the same coat she'd worn in her Christmas stories, with makeup smeared beneath her eyes. They had left Nebraska around midnight and driven through the night. I answered the intercom without unlocking the front door. Dad demanded that I let them in. I asked one simple question. "Why are you here?" He said I had frozen Mom's card, interfered with Chloe's car payment, canceled their rent money, and created panic over one party. He spoke as though my own financial decisions were somehow criminal. Mom stepped closer to the intercom and said they loved me. She insisted that nobody had meant to hurt me. Chloe cut in, saying the live stream had been for work. She claimed I would have complained about the cameras and made the sponsors uncomfortable. I asked why they had said Christmas was canceled instead of simply explaining it was a business event. Chloe said it was complicated. I asked why nearly every relative had attended. She said they needed people in the background. I asked why she had called them the real Christmas crew. She started crying harder and accused me of twisting her words. Dad told me to stop interrogating her and open the door. I didn't move. Then I asked the one question none of them wanted to answer. If this was all just a misunderstanding, why did all three of you know I was eating Christmas dinner alone? The intercom went silent. Mom looked down. Chloe glanced at Dad. He avoided the question and simply said, "January rent is due soon." That answer clarified everything. They hadn't driven through the night because they were ashamed. They hadn't come because they were afraid of losing me. They came because the money was gone. I told them every voluntary payment had ended. The phone plan and internet service would remain active long enough for them to transfer the accounts. Any necessary communication could be sent by email. Dad slammed his palm against the building's front door and accused me of punishing innocent people because my feelings had been hurt. I told him I was simply allowing 3 adults to pay their own bills. He said family didn't abandon family during financial hardship. I reminded him that my family had abandoned me on Christmas. He called me cruel. I answered that cruelty was using someone's money while planning a celebration that deliberately excluded her. Chloe pulled out her phone and began recording, probably hoping I would say something she could use online. I stopped talking. When they continued buzzing other apartments, building security came downstairs. The guard ordered them to leave. Dad argued until the guard threatened to call the police for trespassing. Finally, they went back to their car. Less than an hour later, Chloe posted a story claiming that an unnamed relative was using money to control the people who loved her. She never mentioned the canceled Christmas message, the live stream, or the charges on Mom's card. That afternoon, Evan contacted me. He said he had just learned I'd been told the celebration had been canceled. He apologized for assuming I had chosen not to come. Then he wrote, "Chloe planned this weeks ago. I think you need to see the group chat." Evan sent me 17 screenshots from a private group chat Chloe had created in early December. It included my parents, several cousins, 2 aunts, and the people helping organize the event. Chloe described the party as both a family Christmas celebration and a holiday content opportunity. She asked everyone to wear neutral colors, arrive before 7, and avoid posting publicly before her live stream. A week later, someone asked whether I was flying in. Chloe replied that I wouldn't be invited because I always questioned her spending and would ruin the atmosphere. Mom responded that excluding me seemed harsh. Dad wrote that I would get over it because I always did. That sentence stayed on my screen. It proved that hurting me hadn't been an accident. They had talked about it, anticipated my reaction, and decided my forgiveness was guaranteed. Another screenshot showed Chloe asking whether she could use Mom's emergency card to secure the event company. She promised to replace the money after her sponsor paid her. Dad replied that it should be fine because I was already sending January's rent. They treated my account like a bridge between the life Chloe wanted everyone to see and the money she didn't actually have. Evan apologized over and over. Chloe had told everyone I was too busy and had chosen to skip Christmas. He believed her because my work required frequent travel, and I had occasionally missed family events. I told him I didn't blame him for believing a lie that my own parents had supported. I saved every screenshot with the dates and timestamps visible, adding them to the folder containing the card statements, Dad's demand for rent, and the recording of the live stream. The evidence made me feel calmer. I no longer wondered whether I had misunderstood anything. The truth was neatly organized in front of me. Chloe responded to my silence by escalating her public campaign. She posted quotes about financial abuse and controlling relatives. She uploaded a video saying that some people offered help only so they could take it away whenever they didn't receive enough attention. Her followers had no idea she was talking about me. My relatives did. Mom emailed me, saying Chloe was under a lot of pressure and had made one bad decision. She begged me not to destroy my sister's future over a misunderstanding. Dad accused me of being overly sensitive ever since I was a child. He claimed they had excluded me because Chloe needed one event without criticism. He still didn't acknowledge the lie or the misuse of the emergency card. Instead, he wrote that success had made me arrogant and that a truly generous person wouldn't keep records of everything she gave. I kept records because I worked in compliance, but keeping records wasn't the betrayal. Spending someone else's money while hiding the truth was. 2 days later, my Aunt Patrice called from an unfamiliar number. She said my parents were exhausted, Chloe was humiliated, and I was tearing the family apart because I couldn't forgive one missed Christmas dinner. I asked whether she knew I had been told the celebration was canceled. She said Chloe had claimed I turned down the invitation. I asked whether she knew my emergency card had paid thousands of dollars toward the party. She fell silent. I asked whether she knew Dad had demanded rent money the very next morning. She admitted she hadn't. I sent her 3 screenshots, including Dad's message saying I would get over it. Patrice called back an hour later, sounding like a completely different person. She apologized for judging me before asking what had really happened. She also confirmed that Chloe had thanked guests by describing herself as the person who had financed the entire event. I scheduled a meeting with Maya Chen, the attorney who had helped me during a previous contract dispute. I wasn't interested in suing my family for every pound I had voluntarily given them. I wanted to secure my accounts and determine whether the charges on the emergency card had crossed a legal line. Maya reviewed the card agreement, my written explanation of its permitted use, and the screenshots showing Chloe's intent. She advised me to keep all communication in writing and avoid responding publicly. She explained that I had every right to stop providing voluntary financial support, but that I should clearly separate those payments from any unauthorized expenses. She recommended sending a formal demand for repayment of the event charges, not as an act of revenge, but to establish that the emergency card was never intended to be an unlimited family account. When the charges finally settled, the total for the party came to $3,460. It covered the photo backdrop, lighting, furniture rentals, setup, champagne, and promotional supplies. Chloe had used an emergency card to finance the image of a Christmas celebration my parents had claimed they couldn't afford. Meanwhile, the consequences began to unfold. Chloe missed the final payment deadline with the event company. Instead of negotiating privately, she accused the company online of exploiting a small content creator. The owner responded by posting records showing that Chloe had personally approved the charges. One sponsor saw the dispute and suspended an upcoming campaign. Chloe's autolender notified her that the next payment would require a new funding source. My parents opened their own phone and internet accounts and quickly discovered that the actual monthly cost was far higher than what I had been covering. None of this happened because I attacked them. It happened because the bills had always existed, and I was no longer standing between those bills and the people responsible for paying them. I intended to handle everything from Denver until I remembered that several important documents were still at my parents' house. My birth certificate, tax records, family photographs, and my grandmother's wooden recipe box were all stored in the guest room. I didn't want any of them being used as leverage. I emailed to say I would arrive Saturday afternoon to collect my belongings and that Evan would be coming with me. Dad replied that I was acting like a stranger. I answered that strangers usually received more honesty than I had. The drive from Denver to Papillion gave me far too much time to reconsider. Part of me still hoped that seeing my parents face to face would finally lead to a sincere explanation. Another part of me knew that hope was exactly the weakness they had depended on for years. Evan met me just outside Omaha and followed me to the house. I wanted a witness, not because I expected violence, but because I expected denial. The Christmas lights were still hanging from the roof, although several sections had already gone dark. The party backdrop had been folded up and leaned against the garage wall. Boxes cluttered one side of the driveway. The house that had looked flawless online now seemed tired and disorganized. Mom opened the front door before I even knocked. She looked older than she had just 2 weeks earlier. She reached toward me, but I stepped aside and asked for my documents. Dad stood near the kitchen with his arms folded across his chest. Chloe sat at the table wearing sweatpants, her phone lying face down beside her. No one offered a genuine greeting. Mom followed me upstairs and said she wished I had called instead of bringing Evan. I reminded her that I had called before Christmas and had been told they needed space. She cried and said they had only wanted Chloe to have one successful night. I asked why Chloe's success required pretending I didn't exist. Mom said she had been afraid that objecting would start an argument. I told her that avoiding conflict was still a choice. It simply meant she had chosen me to absorb the consequences. My documents were stored inside a plastic container beneath several winter blankets. I found my birth certificate, college records, tax documents, family photographs, and my grandmother's recipe box. Nothing appeared to be missing. When I came back downstairs, Dad said we needed to talk like adults. I told him that adults didn't lie about canceling Christmas and then demand rent money the very next morning. He said the party had been important to Chloe's career and that I would have made everyone uncomfortable by questioning the expenses. Chloe finally looked up at me. She insisted it had been a business event, not a personal rejection. I placed printed screenshots on the kitchen table. One showed her calling the guests the real Christmas crew. Another showed her telling relatives not to invite me. A third showed Dad saying that I would get over it. Then I laid the credit card statement beside them. Chloe said she had always intended to repay the money. I asked why she had never requested permission to use it. She answered that she knew I would have said no. I told her that knowing I would refuse proved she already understood the money wasn't hers. Dad accused me of humiliating her. I pointed out that only the 4 of us and Evan were in the room. Chloe had humiliated herself when she lied about financing the event and publicly attacked an unpaid vendor. Mom asked whether our family could still be repaired. I told her that repair required truth, responsibility, and changed behavior. So far, they had offered tears, excuses, and accusations. None of those things repaired anything. Dad said I acted as though I had never made a mistake. I answered that this wasn't one mistake. It was a plan developed over several weeks, supported by 3 people, and followed by another demand for money. Before I left, I looked around the kitchen where every holiday gathering had taken place. I used to associate that room with belonging. Now I saw that I had only been welcome when I arrived with gifts, paid a bill, or solved a problem. The moment my presence threatened Chloe's carefully crafted image, I became disposable. I picked up my container and said, "I'm not taking your home, your car, or your future. I'm only taking my name off the bills you chose to create." Chloe asked whether I wanted them to suffer. I told her I wanted them to become responsible for their own lives. Back in Denver, I reviewed 5 years of transfers, payments, invoices, and account statements. I had paid $17,400 toward rent shortages, $9,600 toward Chloe's vehicle, $6,850 toward medical expenses, $5,300 for phone and internet service, and $6,710 for groceries, repairs, and emergencies. The total came to $45,860. I excluded gifts, holiday expenses, and meals because those had truly been given freely. I prepared a detailed report and mailed it by certified mail to each of them. In my letter, I explained that I was not seeking repayment of the $45,860 because those payments had been voluntary. I included the total only so they could never again pretend my support had been small or occasional. I also stated that all future financial assistance had ended permanently. Maya's formal demand required Chloe to repay the $3,460 she had charged to the emergency card for the Christmas party. It also made clear that any future contact would be considered only if it included complete responsibility, without blaming me for the consequences of their own choices. The letters arrived 3 days later. For nearly 2 weeks, no one responded. Then Chloe made the first repayment through Maya's office. She sold a camera lens and 2 designer handbags to repay the remaining balance. After the company reviewed her public dispute with the vendor, her suspended campaign was officially canceled. Unable to keep up with the lease payments on her SUV, she returned it and bought an older car with help from a friend. My parents stayed in their rental until the lease expired, then moved into a smaller townhouse. They sold a second television, their outdoor furniture, and several decorative items they didn't really need. Their lives didn't fall apart. They simply adjusted to living within the income they had always had but had chosen to ignore. I hadn't destroyed them. I had stopped shielding them from the mathematics of their own choices. The final letter came from Mom. She wrote, "We thought you'd always forgive us because you always had." It was the most honest sentence any of them had written. It confirmed that they had mistaken forgiveness for permission. The first few months without my family were quieter than I expected. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. I had grown used to waking up to requests, reminders, and carefully worded emergencies. Dad needed help until Friday. Mom had discovered another unexpected bill. Chloe needed money to protect an opportunity that was supposedly going to change her career. When those messages stopped, I caught myself checking my phone out of habit. Then I noticed what had replaced them. I slept better. I concentrated more at work. I stopped calculating how much of every contract would disappear into someone else's crisis. When my Denver lease ended, I moved into a brighter apartment in Lakewood with a dedicated home office and windows overlooking the foothills. It wasn't extravagant, but every bill belonged to me, and every piece of furniture supported the life I wanted instead of the role my family had assigned me. My consulting business grew after I accepted a long-term healthcare client I had previously been too distracted to pursue. I also started attending a support group for women who carried financial responsibility for parents, siblings, or partners. Our stories were different. The pattern was always the same. We were praised for being dependable until we finally said no. Then we became selfish, controlling, ungrateful. One woman said something I wrote down and kept on my desk. Guilt isn't always proof you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's simply the feeling of breaking an unhealthy rule. My family's rule had always been the same. Natalie would fix it. Natalie would pay. Natalie would forgive. Natalie would quietly accept being excluded because she was mature enough to understand. The moment I stopped following that rule, everyone who had benefited from it called me cruel. Through the support group and counseling, I learned that generosity without boundaries can become enabling. Every time I rescued my family from the consequences of their choices, I made it easier for them to repeat the behavior that had created the problem in the first place. I believed I was protecting them. In reality, I was protecting them from the responsibility that might have helped them grow. I created a new set of financial rules for myself. I would never again put household services in my name for another capable adult. I would never provide a credit card without written limits and regular reviews. I would never send money because of pressure, guilt, or manufactured urgency. Most importantly, I would never confuse someone else's disappointment with proof that I had failed them. Several months later, I took a solo trip to Santa Fe. I wandered through art galleries. I ate breakfast in a quiet courtyard. I spent an entire afternoon hiking without checking my phone for family emergencies. I had always feared that walking away would leave me completely alone. Instead, I realized I had already been lonely inside the relationship. There is a difference between being surrounded by people and being valued by them. Evan remained part of my life. He never pressured me to reconcile. He never carried messages between us. Patrice sent me a sincere apology for judging me before she knew the truth. I accepted her apology because she took responsibility without demanding immediate closeness. That taught me another important lesson. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can let go of your anger without restoring someone to the place from which they hurt you. Over the following year, my parents sent 2 emails. The first simply said they missed me. The second asked whether I would consider meeting with a family counselor. Neither message mentioned money. Neither blamed me. I wasn't ready. But I also didn't need to decide forever. A boundary doesn't have to determine the rest of your life. It only has to protect the life you're living today. Chloe remained silent after repaying the money she had charged to the emergency card. Her online presence gradually became smaller and less polished. I didn't celebrate that. Losing contracts was her consequence, not my victory. My real victory was no longer needing her failure to prove I had been right. Stories about revenge often make people expect dramatic collapses, public confessions, or emotional scenes where every villain begs for forgiveness. Real consequences are usually much quieter. Chloe had to live within her income. My parents had to build a budget without relying on my money. I had to accept that love offered only in exchange for usefulness isn't healthy love. Each of us was finally forced to face something we had spent years avoiding. The lesson was simple. Helping family should always be rooted in honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. Financial support should never be used to purchase affection, and family affection should never be used to demand financial support. A healthy boundary isn't a weapon. It's a clear statement about the behavior you will no longer fund, hide, or accept. It replaces resentment with responsibility. It protects both the individual and the family as a whole. I didn't ruin my family when I canceled those payments. I simply stopped paying them to pretend I belonged. Real family doesn't erase you from the Christmas table and remember your name only when the rent is due. Sometimes the most loving decision you can make is to stop rescuing people from consequences that may finally teach them how to stand on their own. Have you ever had to set a financial boundary with someone you loved? Did they value you for who you were, or did they only miss what you provided? Share your experience in the comments below. Thank you for supporting our storytelling. Everything in this video is fictional and created solely for entertainment and reflection. We hope this story reminds you that your future doesn't have to remain tied to a past where someone failed to value you. Keep moving forward. Smile again. Take pride in the life you've built. You deserve to live it on your own terms.